Switching off your mobile and turning your tablet to silent. Also then, I would like, first of all, to welcome Gary Middleton, who is here to replace Peter Ware. You're most welcome, Gary. And Sonny, if there's anything you don't understand, want clarification, stop us, ask, or afterwards if you want some extra questions on it. So we'll be delighted to help. And also, members, can I have your agreement to write to Peter Ware to thank him for his contribution? Peter has been a long-term, really, a member of the committee and very much valued. We certainly will miss him.
Yes, Chair. I mean, and Peter has made an outstanding contribution to this committee. I mean, he's one of the longest serving, like you say, and I mean, I would appreciate this committee support and writing to him to extend his thanks for that contribution. Yeah,
surely. Particularly, I think his knowledge in local government has been very, very useful.
Could I just associate myself with those remarks?
Good. Yeah, we'll send a very warm letter to him. Okay. Then apologies. We have apologies from Lot Morrow, Barry McCulduff, and Pam is going to be slightly late. She's deputising me to speak at the launch of the Business and Biodiversity Charter in the Glass House, is that right?
Right,
yeah. So she shouldn't be too long. Chairperson's business, members, item 2. Just to remind members that we will be holding our meeting on Thursday, the 18th of June, at the New Girl Conference, as we have always done before, and we will be participating in a panel discussion following our own meeting. And we have said that we will have one member from each party to sit in the panel for questions and answers. Apparently they're getting a journalist to be doing the chairing. So they want to know as soon as possible who will be participating in the panel, because they want to issue their brochures and whatnot to have all the names in their programme. So can we know, Sandra, you be representing your party?
I guess so, yeah.
And I know Pam is willing to do it for the UP. What about Gaho?
So I'll come back to you on that, Chair. Just put a question mark at that. It's grand, but I'll name down for now, yeah.
Okay, and Alban, you be doing
I'm volunteering, Colin.
In his absence.
Yeah, no, he's second that. He's just out the second and he's gone. Just give him a pat on the back.
Okay, yeah. Okay. We'll double check. We'll call him anyway. So, yes, before we send out the list. Okay. Very good. And so, members, I'll refer you also to an invitation from NIEL to a seminar on engaging heritage with community planning, and that's at page 4 of the tabled pack of papers. I suggest Susie Cave, our researcher, maybe to go if members agree to that, and send us a report on the seminar. Would that be okay? Members agree? Okay. Then a couple of other items. In your table pack, page 6, there's an article from the Irish News regarding extraction of sand on Lough Neagh. And also it says that the day before, not today, but yesterday, there was an article about the audit office investigating into into enforcement of this on Lough Neagh. Members may recall that it transpired that the sand extraction requires planning permission, which has never been obtained. So the department said to us I think it was back in October, that from a precautionary approach, they have asked the organisations, the companies, to stop extracting sand. But according to the newspaper, that has been still ongoing on a daily basis. So if we send the article to the department, to the minister, and ask for a response on that, on the enforcement action and what they are doing, I understand they are kind of negotiating still with the organisations. But if they said to us in the committee that they want them to stop in the meantime, we want to know why are they allowed still to be extracting sand on an ongoing basis.
I understand that the sand extraction was in place. It was being done before they actually put in legislation to require planning permission. Isn't that correct?
It's been ongoing since the 30s, apparently.
Yes.
Yes. So they need to put in like a retrospective
That's right.
planning permission, planning application. Sorry, I'm a runny nose.
Can I ask, Chair, have they acquired rights, though, in the interim period? I mean, the question is, I mean, if you were starting from now, you would need a license or permission, or whatever. But if they've been doing this from the 1930s,
Yeah, 1930s,
then surely they've got acquired rights.
Yeah. They've established practices there, so I've been entitled to.
So any application now for retrospective permission may not be required.
Well, I believe they're working with the department on an application. They're working with the NIEA on. So
it's not a retrospective.
they are. I believe that they're working with the department to get it resolved.
To get it done, yeah.
I don't know if they are putting in the application now whether there needs to be an environmental assessment as well. On extracting mineral, extracting sand. So we don't know. Well, what we want to do is send the article and ask them, one, about the fact that we've been told that it's been banned and it's still ongoing. Two, is about the audit office investigation now onto the issue, so they could then respond to us on that. Carol, you want to say something?
No, appreciate it, Chair. And I think, I mean, there's been established practice there for a long period of time, so they would have acquired rights to do that. Obviously, I'd like, as a committee, to be kept updated. I don't know where it's retrospective planning will be needing or extension of what the operations are doing, so it would be kept up to date on how those practices are being carried out.
Sure.
It affects business as well, so.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And also in your table pack then, there's, what page is that?
It's actually
Oh, no,
just
just being
tabled.
circulated.
Just
Okay, sorry. And that's the Criminal Justice Inspection report. It's a press release there for members to read, and it's on really enforcement action and regulation activities of the environmental crime unit in NIEA. So we want to send that and ask the department for their response to the report's recommendations, and ask what actions they're going to take to implement to implement a recommendation, or to consider the findings. And are they going to implement the regulations? Alban?
Chair, I think this is a very important report. I think that the Criminal Justice Inspectorate are a very renowned for giving very detailed, very thorough and properly researched reports, and therefore we should take this with a degree of seriousness in relation to what they are actually recommending. And I think that there has been, certainly in my opinion, there has been a deficit in relation to the enforcement and regulation of environmental crime, and that I think is a big gap in our public life. I think it might be helpful. I agree with you that they asked for the department's response. But I think it might also be helpful if we invited the Criminal Justice Inspectorate here to hear it firsthand from Mr. Corrigan, who led the research and has produced this report. I think it would be very, very helpful to hear from him.
That'd be a good idea.
I would agree with that, Chair.
Yes, yeah, that would be a very good idea. And
We
then
might
we
be able to
could-
do it immediately, Chair,
Yes.
but
Sure.
at some stage.
Sure, we'll do that. We'll schedule that, and perhaps we'll also invite the department to give us an oral briefing
Yes.
on their response as
Yeah.
well.
Okay.
So, okay, members. Yep. Then, members, then we are on to item number 3, minutes on page 6 in your pack. Members, are you content to agree the minutes?
Great.
Content?
Yep.
Okay. Then item number 4, matters arising. Item 4.1 on page 13 is a further response from the department to our request for details of any costs incurred by DOE as a result of the EU infraction proceedings under the Urban Waste Water Treatment Directive in connection to Ballycastle wastewater treatment works. The department stated that as planned work to upgrade the site at Ballycastle is due to complete in 2017, it does not anticipate that fines will be incurred, but that this will be at the discretion of the EU Commission. It has advised that there have been no additional costs incurred by the department arising from the initiation of infraction proceedings. Members, are you content to note?
Great.
But I think it's something we need to really keep, asking for update and keep our focus on it. Okay, thank you. Item 4.2 on page 15 is a response from the department regarding issues raised by the West Tyrone against wind turbines on noise associated with wind farm developments. The Minister has made a commitment to review the strategic planning policy on renewable energy, which will begin following the publication of the SPPS in this final form. The use of ETSU R97 can be considered as part of this review. I remember Sunday the Minister saying that actually in the chamber, that he will take this on as well in a response, I think, to a question. So members so may recall this is obviously a recommendation from our wind turbine, our wind energy inquiry, that this should be looked at urgently. So members, you contend to note and forward the response to West Tyrone against wind turbines?
Agreed.
Okay.
Chair,
Item-
sorry, sir, just for clarification, you're reading this here. I mean, are we still looking at ETSU? I thought ETSU R97 was being reviewed itself. Is that what we're saying here?
No, it's still not. No.
As part of our committee report, because I mean, there's no point in assessing this if we're still going to go with that ETSU R97, because it stands for nothing really. It's outdated, so I mean, there's no point in that. That standard there is now, and that's the case what people are making. That ETSU R97 is not proper standard, and technology has moved on. So I mean, there's no point. I don't mind. I appreciate that the department is looking at PPS 18 renewable energy review, which is grand. But as part of that process, the ETSU R97, we need to be looking at it, or somebody. There's no point in saying that's the standard set, because it's not. Clearly, there's an issue with it.
They have said just in the last paragraph, Cathal, that the use of PSU will be considered as part of the review.
No, that's grand. That's under. But what I'm saying, as long as the department has got responsibility to do, they'll review it as is. They need to be engaging with whoever compiled or composed that to have a proper review. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's all right. The department said we will review.
It's long overdue as well. It
Yeah.
was meant to be reviewed after 2 years when it was first set up. and that review has never been done. So we
Oh,
certainly
oh,
welcome.
Chair, I appreciate it, as long as it's been looked at properly, that's grand.
Yeah, yeah.
Members, just to advise you as well, we're hoping to get the department, obviously we're still waiting the formal response from the Minister in relation to the wind energy inquiry, and we're expecting that in early June. So we can get, we can address those issues
you.
with the
Yeah.
department then whenever we
you.
schedule that
Yeah.
briefing.
Surely, yep. Maybe Gary, you may want to have a look at the report when we send that to you.
Sure,
Yeah,
thanks.
yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. Chair.
Okay, item 4.3 on page 17 is correspondence from the department providing additional information requested by the clerk on its consultation on the draft waste management licensing amendment regulations. The department will be providing the committee with a synopsis of responses to the consultation for consideration at our next meeting. So, members, are you content to note this? Okay, at this stage? Okay, and we will just revisit it next week. Then, item 4.4 on page 20 is a response from the department regarding issues raised by CAOS, VOCO, on the planning policy for large-scale solar energy development. Members, as you know, we really cannot deal with individual applications. So, members, you content to note the correspondence and forward it to the department. Oh, sorry, this is the department coming back. If we can then forward the response then to the organisation or to the group. Okay, members, content?
It's content,
Okay.
sure.
Next item 4.5 on pages 22 and 23. There is a response from the department to correspondence regarding the development along the 6 Mile Water River, which included a public petition presented to the Assembly. The responsibility for planning applications is now transferred to the Antrim and Newtownabbey Borough Council. Members, are you content if we forward the correspondence received from 6 Mile Water Trust to the council and to advise the council to advise of the trust of this action that we have sent it to the local council, which has the responsibility for it. Okay.
Yes, agreed.
Happy with
Agreed,
that? Okay. Item 4.6, members, on page 23 is a response from the department regarding pollution along the 6 Mile Water River. Members, also, I was looking at it that I noticed certainly a lot of the incidents of polluting that water really came from, over the last 5 years, came from the Northern Ireland Water, or the previous name Water Services. I just wonder if we can ask for more details of this. So, members, would you want us to write to the department to ask them what measures are being taken to reduce the pollution incidents along this river? Certainly quite a lot of incidents. If you look at page 30 as well, that's quite a clear, like a table showing you. Certainly I can see Northern Ireland Water certainly has been a culprit on many occasions.
Yes.
Chair,
It's
I
all
think-
sewage getting into the water.
I appreciate that, Chair, but I think the alarming thing is that the number of pollutions, number of pollutants is rising.
Yeah,
Which is a problem.
that's right. It's
I mean, that's the
rising
problem. is that
every year.
Every year, so
Rising
you're
every
going
year.
from, it's
Yeah.
up every year, so that's the problem. I mean, so,
Although, I mean, they're saying a lot of the pollution is at a low level, but still, it's ongoing. It's as you say, it's a trend of increasing.
Yeah, Chair, I appreciate that. The point I'm making is from 2010 to 2015, there's been a lot of discussion, and the preferred Lord Morrow has brought this up on a number of occasions, whether high level or low level. The message should be getting out that there's, you're polluting the river.
Yeah.
So clearly there's a job of work to be done there to get the message out. You know what I mean? So, but I appreciate we'll be kept updated, and hopefully there'll be something done about it. Like, to be honest.
What are they doing
Exactly.
to prevent it? Yeah.
I just want to agree with Cathal. And looking at it, I just made a rough calculation, and maybe up to about a third of these incidents are from Northern Ireland water. Which is sort of irony, given the fact that we're dealing with the river.
Yes.
And most of them seem to be in relation to sewage.
Yeah. They're nearly all on sewage. Yeah.
No, they're regarded as low, I think.
Yeah.
In
It
the
is
end,
mostly low. Yeah.
But it seems an incredible repetition of incidents, pollution incidents, and one would wonder, given the almost systemic nature of the incidents, that Northern Ireland Water haven't done enough to bring this to an end or to minimise it. Seems quite extraordinary in the circumstances.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then we always have the policy of polluters pay.
Yes.
So we want to know, is Northern Ireland Water asked, to pay for remedying the water quality there?
But I mean, even if they do, I mean, it's essentially a public body, and it's really the public purse paying the public purse,
True.
and it's not
But
really
it's from
a
another
remedy in a
department,
sense,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
100%, and should be that.
But it's extraordinary, and it seems to me to be sustained, and there doesn't seem to be any serious attempt to try and stop these incidents.
Yeah. So maybe we express
Maybe we should ask there how many prosecutions have come out of since over this last 5 years, from the incidents that are described here.
Yeah. And about particularly also Northern Ireland Water. What discussions have they had between, the two departments about avoiding any future incidents happening? Yep. Okay, members. Next item then. Just for members to note, really, yes, members, items 4.7 and 4.8 on pages 32 and 33, really just for noting, members, okay. Then item 4.9 on page 34 is a response from DRD regarding the issues that Disability Action raised in relation to wheelchair accessible taxis at taxi ranks. They have advised that DART takes advice from IMTAC, who recognise layout of taxi ranks can be constrained by local site conditions, and that Transport NI will contact IMTAC officials with a view to carrying out a review of existing taxi ranks in Belfast to assess what, if any, amendments are required. So also, members, in your table pack on page 8, there is an IMTAC statement regarding retention of curb separation between footway and carriageway, and just for members to note. So, members, just wonder, would you wish us to write to the DRD to encourage Transport NI also to liaise with Disability Action? Disability Action came to us and they are on the ground and they are very aware of the issues. So if we suggest that they should also liaise with Disability Action in relation to any review and to forward this correspondence to Disability Action, IMTAC and DOE?
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Next item, item 5, Road Traffic Amendment Bill. We're getting a departmental briefing, and there is a written briefing on page 37 in your pack. Members, the committee considered correspondence from the department at our last meeting, outlining the rationale for and detail of additional amendments that the Minister intends to table to the Road Traffic Amendment Bill. As the committee has already concluded our committee stage of the bill and provided a report to the Assembly, the committee agreed to invite officials to brief us on the need for the additional amendments. So, members, if I could refer you to a briefing paper from the department at page 37, correspondence from the Minister regarding the amendments at page 47, and a summary of recommendations from the committee report on the bill at page 55. So if I welcome back Donald Starrett and Road User Behaviours Policy and Strategy Branch, and Nicola McAvoy. Nicola is also from the Road Safety Department of the Environment. Oh dear. We're back again with more amendments. Yes, yeah. Well,
What have we collectively done wrong?
Yes. Right. Please go ahead and brief the committee.
Thanks, Chair. If I could start just by saying...
sorry, just to remind everyone, this is being recorded by Hansat as it's legislation.
Yeah, if I could just start by saying I'm sorry that we have to be here today, and the fact that we weren't able to raise these amendments during committee stage. They did come up in March, but and just at the end of committee stage. But we wanted to take some time to actually ensure that we needed to make the changes. We were obviously reluctant to do that outside committee stage. We're now satisfied they are essential. So, if you're content, Chair, I'm happy to talk briefly through those.
Yep.
As you said there, the briefing note sets out the amendments, and the first three, which I wasn't going to focus on too much, but amendments 1, 2 and 3 are the amendments that we've already agreed with committee. Taken together, those remove the statutory option from the drink driving provisions, and then in relation to graduated driver licensing, they retain the minimum age for a provisional licence at 17 and provide for a 6-month mandatory minimum learning period rather than 12 months. And those were the three amendments that the Minister's bringing with at committee's request. There's one very minor consequential amendment to one of those. It's where we were making changes from 12 months to 6 months, we actually missed one of the references. So there's an additional change made there. It's just a consequential change, and it's not really a technical change. So if members are content, I'll talk a bit about the number 4, policy amendment number 4. Committee will know that the bill is drafted. It's a range of restrictions on newly qualified drivers, and those are things like the passenger restrictions and the need to display a plate. And those are covered in Clause 20 of the bill. And Clause 20 then also goes on to define what's meant by a newly qualified driver. And that definition, as it stands in the bill, covers new drivers from other European states, so any member state would have been covered by that definition. What we've now found, and this came out of contact with our colleagues in the Department for Transport, that the third driving licence directive doesn't allow us to do that. And this is something which I think it's probably fair to say, because of the infraction proceedings, the directive has been gone through in a lot more detail. It's been looked at closely. We have kind of challenged that, but we're now satisfied that we're not allowed to apply our restrictions to other member states, and therefore what we're doing here is amending that definition so that it only covers new drivers in Northern Ireland and Great Britain. So,
and you didn't see that coming, Donald?
Sorry?
You didn't see that coming, when you were drafting the bill?
The bill was originally drafted quite a while ago, Chair, and I think it's probably fair to say that the understanding of what the directive requires us to do has improved, and it's improved a lot in the last few months. So, no, we didn't see it coming, and ideally we would have, but certainly when we were here last, no sign of this.
Okay.
Because it would have been a lot easier
Yes.
to completely accept that to do it then.
Yeah.
But,
Okay. Well, it's done now.
okay, thank you.
Where we
Can I
are.
ask one
Yeah.
question?
Yes.
You're absolutely certain it's member states, it's not other jurisdictions. You said Great Britain that
Yes, yes.
would
it's-
apply to people who hold a licence in Scotland or England and Wales.
Yes, we're satisfied, and that came. We did have direct meetings with our colleagues in Department for Transport, and
Yes.
they're satisfied that we're within our rights to apply it to the rest of the member state, if you like.
Yes.
But we can't go beyond. That's
But
right.
drivers coming from, say, the Irish Republic, they would not be subject.
They couldn't be subject to our
They couldn't be.
restrictions. That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other changes then, which you can go through, we've covered those under the heading of technical amendments. And the first one of those is something that we've already agreed with committee. It's simply a renumbering amendment. It reflects an insertion that was made by the Immigration Act 2014. So that one's already been agreed. The next one then is...
Remind me
Sorry.
again, what is that?
Basically, the Immigration Act had put in a residency requirement, had inserted a residency requirement into the road traffic legislation, and because that insertion had been made, we just had to change our numbering. So it's simply a numbering requirement. So it was, I say, just a technical change.
Okay.
The next one then is headed this application of the minimum period for holding provisional licence in certain periods, certain cases. And the bill as it's drafted at the moment takes away the minimum learning period if in circumstances where a driver is required to retake their driving test following a restriction. So they've already served the restricted period once. They don't have to serve it again. This amendment simply amends clause 17 of the bill to refer to the equivalent provision in GB. And really what that means is that if you had a scenario where there was a Northern Ireland driver who was disqualified when they were driving on the GB roads and they're retaking their test in Northern Ireland, is to ensure that that person is treated the same as a person disqualified in Northern Ireland. So again, that is something which was picked up by Department for Transport. They're perfectly happy with the amendment, but it's to make sure we cover that scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Say that's changes to clause 17. And then the next one, which is a new amendment as well, it's actually quite a similar thing. It refers to restrictions on newly qualified drivers, and again, it's disapplying restrictions for those requalifying in certain circumstances. And what that's saying basically is that, again, given that the situation with Great Britain and that disqualifications, the restrictions would need to be mutually recognised, so we need to amend the clause so that it includes the equivalent provision in GB. And again, it's very similar to the previous one, but it's to ensure that, again, a situation where someone's been disqualified while driving in GB.
Okay.
And then, leaving the best to last, perhaps, but the last one is the extending facility of approved courses for new drivers to those who have passed the Northern Ireland test but haven't yet obtained their driving licence. It's not. I should say this one's a very lengthy looking amendment. It's not as bad as it looks. it's basically because the legislation that we're having to amend sits in 3 different places, and therefore there's a lot of repetition within the amendment. The clause, just as it's drafted and previously agreed with committee, allows the department to give new drivers, offer new drivers approved courses as an alternative to revoking their licence. However, some new drivers will be driving on the basis of their test certificate. They haven't yet got the full licence, and as things stand, those drivers wouldn't be allowed to be offered an approved course. Now, that wasn't the policy intention, and that is an oversight on our part. Again, it was picked up by Department for Transport. It's something that could have been picked up, but obviously it's better that it's picked up now and fixed. So what we're really doing with this amendment is to ensure that if you're disqualified and you're driving on the basis of a it's basically just to give these people the same rights as people who have got their full test. So,
And hopefully there won't be too many.
no, I don't. We got some figures on the number of people that were driving on the test certificate.
Well, we didn't get the figures, but people actually can drive on their test certificate right up until the time that they go to renew their licence. You know, there's no law in place to say you must hand in your test certificate within a certain amount of time.
Okay.
So we just thought it was very important to make sure that these people would be eligible to be referred to the remedial courses, the same as those who have their full licence.
Okay, so once they pass the test, then they
Once you
have that
pass your test, you
certificate.
should,
Yes.
hand in your certificate and get your full licence,
Good licence.
then sent back to you. But you're not breaking the law by driving with a provisional licence with your test pass certificate.
Because
not
yeah,
compulsory to
sometimes
hand in your
people, because you've paid for that license, you want to go right to the end of that period.
After paying for all the
Yeah.
lessons, Chair, you couldn't afford the license.
But I mean, the majority of people transfer within the first year, would hand in their test pass certificate and get their full licence. But just to pick up those few that mightn't.
Yeah. Okay, and all that's been picked up by the Department for Transport. Okay. Okay, any more?
And the very final section of technical amendments, those again, Chair, are amendments that have already been agreed by committee, so no changes in those. So that's really all of the amendments. So just if there's any other questions, happy to.
Okay. Carol,
Yeah, Chair, and thanks very much. I normally say you're welcome back, Colin, but I've gone through this period. I just wanted to clarify this point because I think, in terms of the whole idea about the legislation, what we're trying to do, and the road safety element, basically you're saying under clause 20, are we saying here that anybody who does the test here and qualify to the restrictions? Is that what we're saying here? Anybody who does the test here,
Yeah.
pass the test here.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it wouldn't matter where they're from, done the test, they'd have to abide by.
Yeah.
Yes, if they've done the Northern Ireland test, that's right.
No 100%, because I mean, well, I've some reservation about it in terms of the whole idea behind the legislation is to try and to reduce the number of
Yes.
better qualified people to give, especially young people, a better opportunity and all of that there, but it's grand. It's one of those things. Obviously, clearly, when you looked at European legislation, it was something that we couldn't. But I think overall, I mean, it's just a better understanding. That's grand.
And people who are over at university across
Yeah.
the water and take the GB test, when they come back to
Yeah.
Northern Ireland, they'll also be subject to the restrictions.
No, 100%. I know, I understand it. I've like the overall
Yeah.
policy thing. I'm a
Yeah.
wee bit
Yeah.
of concern about, because I mean, if we look at the stats and the figures, traditionally through the the number of traffic collisions down through the years. I mean,
Yes.
but we are where we are. I mean,
Well, it's only better legislation now,
Yeah.
kind of more comprehensive rather than later on you have to do other regulations to try to amend it. Donald, what's the time scale for this? We've been waiting for the consideration stage for quite some time.
Where we are at the moment, Chair, is we have the Minister has put an executive paper in, and we're basically waiting for it to be considered by the executive. So the next opportunity will be the 20th of May. And
For the papers to be discussed?
There is one.
Okay.
yeah.
There is.
But so we'll continue on to see how we go with this.
Okay, so it's scheduled. Hopefully we get it
Feeling
on the
positive?
28th.
After next week, we'll be off next Wednesday, so we'll see. You're all being recorded, by the way.
Okay, then once that's approved, then we will then go on to consideration stage then.
Yes, I think provisionally we would be talking about, off the top of my head, I think it's 15th of June, so it would be mid-June for consideration stage where
Okay,
the executive to approve on the
Yes.
20th.
and then the final
Versions of anything.
consideration stage then. Or we could finish the whole thing, couldn't we? Really before the end of the session.
It would just about be possible.
about,
That's
if we
the
can
last
get
date
through.
that would allow
Yeah.
us to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, members, just to say, yes, now we're hearing from Donald and Nicola about the amendments they're putting in. We have already concluded our consideration stage and produced a report. So all we can say is that we note this today, and in my speech during the consideration stage, we mentioned this. You know, that these are later amendments that we have listened to and noted, but have not reported to the Assembly. So members are okay with that? Yeah. There's no point kind of recalling the report and then adding in addendum or whatever. Okay.
The Minister just wanted to ensure that it was brought to committee's attention. We knew it wouldn't change the report, but it was just to sort of do that ahead of consideration stage.
Appreciate that. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Members, then next item 6 is an SL, and welcome back, Pamela. Thank you for Pam. Thank you for standing in for me. So welcome back to the committee. Was it okay? Went well?
That's good.
Lots of people turned up? Good. Well done. Yeah. Then next item is on page 56, members, and SR, and that's on the food waste regulations, NI. Departmental briefing again, members. This we discussed before on this issue, members. If you recall, we were briefed on the implications and anticipated costs of the food waste regulation NI by Act 21 and the North West Waste Management Group on the 16th of April 2015. We wrote to the department then asking for further information on the proposals for collecting food waste separately. The committee also asked for details of Council's recycling collections, which was obtained from the councils directly. Members, just to refer you to a committee briefing paper on page 57, and a response from the department on page 60, and responses from councils setting out the recycling services currently available in their area from pages 63 to 78. And we want to just take this opportunity to thank all the councils who have all cooperated with us and sent in the information very quickly. The regulation is from page 79, members. A table summarising the Council's responses is tabled, as is suggested, kind of topics and questions, members. So that's where is that
It's
the
loose.
table?
It's not in the table pack. It's just
Okay.
loose on your desk. It's the document here.
Just this one? Yeah. Okay. If I can just welcome Mark Livingstone and Northern Ireland Environment Agency, and William Duclos, Waste Strategy Branch. we were quite perplexed, so we certainly would need a good briefing from you. If you please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. As you said, we provided a briefing previously, and you also received a briefing from ARC21 and the North West Regional Waste Management Group. You'd asked a couple of questions, and I think they were really around the issue of separate collection as opposed to mixed or commingled collection of food waste.
It's rationale, I think we question.
Yes.
Yes.
The rationale, the Department, in terms of policy position, is strongly in favour of separately collected food waste.
Okay.
Now, we base that on evidence that has been provided over a number of years. A report by RAP in 2010 set out quite startling figures for the difference in the amount of food waste that you collect if you collect it separately as opposed to mixed or commingled food waste. Now, that data was taken from across the UK. There was relatively little data from Northern Ireland at that time. That really is the basis of our policy in favour of separate collection. We believe that from that evidence that the amount of food waste is substantially increased. We also believe that participation rates are increased. I think that perhaps people who receive a separate bin for food waste compared to the normal brown bin for mixed food and green waste are more likely to participate because that is the bin for food waste. The brown waste bin is a seasonal bin as far as green or garden waste is concerned, and there is a tendency not to put the brown bin perhaps out for collection in the winter months when there isn't any green waste there. So perhaps that would lead to a lack of participation in food waste. Also, in terms of waste prevention, we feel that when householders see a food waste receptacle with the amount of food waste that they have put into it for the week, that brings it home to them, the amount of food that they're wasting on a regular basis in a much more stark way than if it was mixed with other waste. And that leads, I think, to the view that it supports waste prevention. It reduces the amount of food waste going to landfill, and that's really the main purpose of the regulations. At the moment, we have a mixed picture across Northern Ireland. Some people still don't have any food waste collections. Many householders have commingled collections. Some have separate collections. We're still sending 118,000 tonnes of food waste to landfill from households every year. And we need to have a step change in the way that we deal with food waste. And we believe that separate collections will reduce that amount of food waste to landfill substantially.
Okay. But then you put in a caveat to say that if the councils believe that's not going to encourage more food waste to be collected, then they can do like what they've done before with just only one bin. So how do they make that judgment? How is that monitored by yourself?
Well, that's right. I'll hand over to Mark Livingstone from the agency, who's the regulator, obviously, and will be involved in talks with the waste management groups to establish a proper mechanism. But yes, if I may say, first of all, the regulations do provide that possibility for councils, and that is in recognition of the fact that many councils currently have commingled collections, and if they can prove that those commingled collections are as good as or nearly as good as what you would expect from separate collections, then we're happy that meets the terms of the regulations.
And the tendency would be for councils not to do anything, not to make any changes.
I'm not sure I can comment really on that. I mean, it is for them. They must obviously meet the terms of the regulations. They must comply with the regulations, and we believe that the evidence points to separate collections being better in terms of the amount collected than commingled collections. So they will have to prove otherwise to meet the regulations. Doing nothing or adopting a status quo position is not going to be sufficient in itself.
Okay. William?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, committee members. I would just like to state that I suppose NIA is very mindful that we wish to use intelligent and evidence-based regulation for this type of topic, so that it won't be a burden on councils and householders. Because even from a simple experience myself, I had to drag 2 bins up a 200-metre laneway last night, and I'm conscious that will impose a burden just on householders.
Yes. I did that too.
My children have to do that as well.
Could have stuck in the tow bar and dragged it up, to be honest.
They can't afford it.
You wouldn't want to be walking up that.
We're also very aware that many councils are starting from different places, because a lot of guys have commingled setups. Some collect food waste separately already. Some don't have any different collections for food waste and green waste as it is.
I think only 2 councils says they have separated receptacles for food waste. I think only 2.
Yeah,
From memory.
that's right.
I read. Yeah.
I suppose I would focus on the point that councils are expected to undertake their own analysis and satisfy the department and thus the agency that they have the evidence to support one approach or another. And we've been working very closely over the past couple of weeks with ARC21, who represent the six probably the biggest councils. I think they represent about 400,000 households, about developing an approach to gathering that evidence base, and we're still at the very early stages of that. That in mind, I haven't been able to speak to the remaining the remainder of the 11 councils, but we do have what we term as a central local government working group, and this will be put on it as a topic of how do we gather that evidence, what's the best practice, how is this detailed, so as we can make a decision based on each council's individual's response to that. So we're in no mind of ensuring that this is food waste separate collections for everyone today. We have to go through the evidence gathering for each individual council, and then we can make a decision based on what the actual regulations say before we implement it.
Okay. But the regulations through anyway.
Yeah.
So. Okay. They also mention the cost, extra cost to councils by providing these separate receptacles. How much would they be per piece of the new bin? Are they as big as the normal black bin, or are they going to be smaller bins?
It will be for councils to decide how they collect, but normally I believe that they are looking at 50-litre bins for food waste, which is substantially smaller than any of the other bins that you have currently.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't know, Chair, the cost individually of those bins.
Okay. Because some councils have those curbside boxes. Would they be something like that?
I think the sizes of the boxes vary a little bit from council to council, but I think that a 50-litre container would be something similar to a Kirby box.
Okay.
In capacity.
Right. Okay. And also the fact that the Act 21 mentioned that when during treatment, when you collect food and garden waste separately, but when you treat them, you put them all together again. And it just sounds very irrational.
Yes, that depends very much, Chair, on the treatment process that you decide upon.
Okay.
There are a number of different treatment processes available. There's what's called in-vessel composting, IVC. There's also anaerobic digestion.
Yeah.
And there are other technologies available and indeed evolving and developing quite quickly. What we wanted to do with the regulations was to future-proof them, to ensure that in the future we would facilitate other technologies like anaerobic digestion, which actually get greater value out of the food waste. In comparison to IVC, anaerobic digestion also provides heat and power, which can be added to the electricity grid. and the digestate from anaerobic digestion can be used as a substitute to artificial fertilisers on the land.
Okay.
So there are very good resource efficiency reasons why you would go for newer technologies compared to the technologies that are currently being used by the waste management groups. And we wanted the regulations to push in that direction, in the direction of getting greater value from the food waste. And separately collecting the food waste facilitates those new technologies, because those new technologies can take the food waste separately and prefer to take the food waste separately.
Okay, well that's actually quite a good thing, because now we are talking so much about the circular economy.
Indeed, sure.
Not treating waste as waste, but as a resource rather than dumping them in landfill sites. Yeah. Okay, I'll let the others in. Pam?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for coming today. I know these regulations are already passed, so we're really talking about them really in hindsight, but I think it's good to get some clarification on some of the issues, because it does appear to be very confusing and doesn't seem to make much sense, and in some regards parts of it don't seem to make sense. First of all, could I ask, the regulations, are they designed to force those councils who aren't processing any bio-waste to do so? Are we going from a voluntary situation where you were saying now, right, actually, right, most of you are doing it, well done, but some of you are not doing it at all?
Yes.
Because obviously, I mean, you've got Derrin-Strabane District Council who have no bio-waste collection.
Careful.
Out of
They're being recorded.
56,644 households. That's a huge amount. So, and not just one council, and then you have another council there from Ananoma who are not even collecting half of their households, less than half. So even if the regulations just bring those two councils into line with the rest of the councils, you're going to have you're going to be processing a lot more bio-waste.
That's right. I presume you mean mainly food waste. Talk about
well,
bio-waste.
Because I know you're talking about separate, and that's what I don't really. I don't see massive benefit in separate collections. In fact, I'd see the opposite in that, because as a keen recycler, I know that whether it was collected separately or not, my waste would still be the same. My food waste is collected in the receptacle, goes into what we have as a brown bin, to add to anything else that's in the brown bin. I don't see, to me, it would actually cost more money to make it more. It would be less environmentally friendly to put another lorry on the road to collect it separately. I don't see the advantage, certainly not from my point of view, and I just wonder, is there not a lot more to be done in terms of education to actually get people to recycle it, and it could easily be collected together. I think there's many other problems there as well, with the introduction of more bins of any description. I mean, I have 3 huge bins and I use them all, but there's no way I could actually have it. I have it out on the street. I have them in the street because there's no room for them. I don't think Sandra's kids can grow any more arms to pull any more down the lane.
Or they pull them up empty. I
know I've asked you a lot of questions there.
Okay. Thank you very much. The first question, I think, was around whether the regulations will force those councils who don't currently have a food waste collection to do so. Yes, they will. It will be an absolute requirement from the 1st of April 2017 for councils to provide a receptacle for every householder and to collect that food waste.
But just on that, so does this mean it doesn't actually cover the garden waste?
The regulations are food waste only.
Just food?
Yeah.
So we're still in the same position, actually, that Derrin-Strabane may never collect garden waste if they're only forced to collect food waste.
Certainly, these regulations are purely relating to food waste. Councils do collect. Most councils do collect other bio waste, green waste, And I think that the councils that you mentioned are bringing in, shortly, are bringing in both food and green or garden waste collections. But there are still parts of councils that do not have green waste collections, and parts of councils that do not have food waste collections. But we're concentrating very much on food waste. Councils also do have obligations in relation to recycling generally, and we all have an obligation to meet 50% household recycling by 2020. And the collection of green or garden waste is a major contributory factor to meeting that target. So I think all councils are encouraged to collect green and garden waste, and most do. I think you also asked a question about the scepticism about the merits of separate collection. Yeah. The evidence that we have, and I'd be happy to provide the committee with the report that was provided to us by RAP, it actually suggests that nearly double the amount of food waste could be obtainable with separate collections as compared to mixed collections. I do accept that it depends on the individual. It also depends on the council to the extent that they provide communication and education to householders. And
also, do they provide the little caddies as well, the brown caddies? That's to encourage people.
Yes, absolutely. And also bag liners, Chair, with the caddies is a major, I think, encouragement to people to collect their food waste. There are lots of things councils can do in terms of communication and education and infrastructure. But at the end of the day, on average, it is definitely, the evidence is definitely there to suggest that separate collections do collect a higher amount, a higher yield than mixed collections.
So far from the information we got from the councils, only one council operates a food waste only collection. It's only one at the moment. So
now, we do have I do have anecdotal evidence of other councils,
right.
And I can. Would it be reasonable? Is it okay for me to
yes.
to name those?
Yeah.
Antrim Council in part of their area has a separate food waste collection.
Okay.
Belfast, in part of, I think it's the inner city area in Belfast, has a separate food waste collection. Omagh and Fermanagh, in both the Omagh and Fermanagh parts of that new council, are introducing separate food waste collections in the rural areas, not in the urban areas. And there are other councils that I can't quite recall. So I think there are more separate collections than that, perhaps.
Good.
Chair, if I could just
yes,
supplement your question there. It's that in the case of Antrim Newton Abbey, because we have a chart in front of us here, so they have 56,000 say dry waste, garden waste 48,500. So there's there's a difference of 8,000 houses obviously that don't have garden waste collection. So does it mean that those houses they're having their food collected separately because they don't have the garden waste? Is that what that means?
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I'm not sure what those figures for that council mean. I'm not au fait with
you
that.
mentioned that Antrim Newton Abbey, in part,
yes,
have a food only collection.
Yes.
So my question is that to the households that don't have a garden waste collection?
Well, those that have the separate food collection do not, I believe, have a separate garden.
So
they're the rural. It's the more rural
they'll be
areas.
collecting it because they don't have. They'll be collecting the food separately because they don't have the brown bin basically to put the food in.
They don't currently. They could have decided to put a brown bin in instead, but they put a separate collection in.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay, Pam?
Okay, I have another question too, just to ask about, obviously we're looking at households in particular, but what about business and biowaste and restaurants and that, what recycling is done on behalf of businesses?
Thank you. The regulations also stipulate requirements for businesses that produce food waste. Now, it depends upon how much they produce, but if they produce over 50 kilograms per week of food waste, they are required from 2016 to leave that food waste out for separate collection. They're currently, some businesses may already do that, and some businesses may already do that with other bio waste, although it's less likely in a food business. But they will have that obligation now from 2016, and then a much wider group of food producers, any business producing over 5 kilograms per week will be obligated from 2017. So that will make a huge difference, I think, also in the amount of food that we divert from landfill.
Yeah, I would imagine that should be a massive amount. When you think of restaurants in particular and the amount of food waste they must have. I take it the department doesn't have any figures on how much waste is collected voluntarily.
I'm not sure.
At all?
Our RIA did cover some of that ground, but to be honest, I'm not sure exactly of the figure for what is currently collected. Yeah. But there would be some currently collected, but I'm afraid I don't know the figure. Yeah. What we do know is that there's 36,000 tonnes currently per year that is not collected and that goes to landfill, and that's what we want to capture.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you see them in these massive blue double bin, whatever they call EU bins or whatever, and absolutely filled to the bin of all types of waste. Really, yeah. Okay, Cathal?
Thanks, Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation, William and Mark. William, I'm a wee bit concerned, to be honest. Yeah, the principle of it, I don't have any problem, to be honest. But it seems to me, and I don't want to put burden on any council, or it's not really putting a burden on council, it's putting a burden on householders, to be honest. But it seems to be all over the place. Because some of us are collecting cold mingle, people are not doing anything. And I mean, my main thrust to this whole debate would be that at some point all the council areas should be doing the same thing. And the question I want to ask when we're bringing these regulations in, I wouldn't be picking on any one council or another, but if we're serious about this, because you only mentioned 118,000 tonnes there, on the grand scale of things it doesn't seem a lot. I could argue, is it all business? Is it 2 council areas? Because I know Armagh's collecting theirs. We've heard stories about there's cold mingle, it has to be treated the same way and separated and whatever. And it seems to me we're starting off on the wrong foot. But I just, that's the kind of arguments we're getting now because we've heard 2 presentations up tonight. Where I would like to take it forward is a time frame for how we get all the councils bought into this. In terms of how you actually separate that in terms of the food waste and the grass, because down there where you have a brown bin and we'll put all into one. I would say some of the grass cuttings would fill a brown bin some weeks, so where are we going with all this and how have we got the councils to buy into this and what's the time frame for? Is it a 5-year period and say, look, we'll have this all sorted out, because ultimately that's where we need to go with this. Yeah.
Thank you. Originally, as far as the household collections were concerned, we had, in the consultation document, made the requirement for councils to produce receptacles in 2016. We put that back a year to 2017 on the basis that it would be helpful for the new council structures to bed in. I do have quite a bit of sympathy with your argument that different councils are doing different things in terms of their collection systems, and even within the new councils, inevitably, at least for in the initial stages, even within councils, there are different practices in different areas. That is, though, although I have sympathy for that, it is a matter legally for the councils. It is their decision as to what collection systems they put in place and what bins and what colour of bins they put in place. I think it would be better to see a much more consistent approach across councils. What the regulations do, though, is insist that they collect food waste, and that means that there's no discretion, so that there will be consistency across there will be consistency across all councils in collecting food waste from 2017.
No, I understand the arguments, William. What I'm saying to you, the basic principle is that you started out by saying there's 118,000 tonnes of landfill. And I assume that's all because of Europe and because of infraction and trying to do things better and all of that. Infraction, right? So we have to work collectively together. There's no point in saying 9 out of 11 councils now do their bit and 2 councils don't. So up here we're trying to put something in place. I don't mind each individual council area tendering a different process or using different bins. That's not the issue. That's up to council how they do business. But the broad principle is all about recycling and you know, this regulation. That's the point I'm making. And at some point we need to get everybody together and say, look, this is what we have to do. You know, you're saying, right, you're leaving the council to do it. Who's paying for all this? Is the householder? Is there grants? Is there funding? Is there European funding? We're bringing in regulation and we're saying, okay, council, away you go. So council goes and Monday night makes a decision. Right, householders, as of the 1st April 2017, we're bringing you another bin and we want you to separate. Is that it? Is that what we're saying here in terms of paying? Who's paying for this? Yeah.
In terms of the funding,
yeah.
Our RIA did do a costing of what it would mean for councils across Northern Ireland to introduce separate collections. And the net cost over a 10-year period was around £4 million. Now, there would be substantial set-up costs in terms of vehicles and receptacles, but that would be offset by the cost reductions, the benefits of reduced amount of food waste to landfill, which is becoming very costly. So £4 million over a 10-year period in the grand scheme of things isn't, we believe, a huge amount of money. We have, though, in the past, and it was interesting that the member raised Derry and Strabane Council and Oman Fermanagh, because they are both councils in the last couple of years that have benefited from Rethink Waste funding to introduce food waste collections. Now, some of those haven't been introduced yet, but are planned to do so through over the next year. So Rethink Waste funding has been made available over the last 3 years, specifically in relation to food waste collections across Northern Ireland. Now, there is very limited scope with the current financial constraints on the department for further funding to be made available, but certainly funding has been made available.
I'm going to ask them more. I think this would have been a good debate on the floor of the chamber, just to tease out all of these things. But Grant, I've finished my question for now.
Okay. Colin?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Sorry I missed the start of it. Just for the record, there's 24,000 houses getting food waste collected from Derry and Strabane, so we're on the road anyway. I think it's about halfway there. In terms of the garden waste, about maybe 4.5 years ago, Derry City Council gave everybody a compost bin, even those who didn't want it. Houses that didn't have gardens still got it. Some of them are now being used as coal bunkers, but a lot of them are being used for the right reason. So I'm just wondering, is that a way? It might not be a way of hitting your targets, but it might actually be a real way of getting some recycling done. I know a lot of people do value them and do use them. We might not have needed to give them to everybody, but I think rather than trying to hit targets all the time, maybe actually having recycling being done through compost bins or whatever might be a better way of actually getting the job done rather than just ticking a box. I just wonder what you think about that.
Well, the department supports the idea of councils providing composting bins to householders, and it is, as you say, a very valuable way of ensuring that recycling is done immediately rather than going through a process. So, you know, there's no problem with encouraging that initiative. On the other hand, in terms of these regulations, when you're talking about food waste, it's a slightly different situation. And I think for food waste, the provision of composting bins would not be sufficient to comply with these regulations. But certainly in the wider collection of garden and green waste, we would very, very much encourage councils, and I know pretty much all councils in Northern Ireland have provided their householders with composting bins.
would it be better just to have composting bins rather than another collection, or is it not sufficient, do you think, to deal with the...
Well, as I say, in relation to food waste, it wouldn't...
In terms of actual just garden waste, if you'd had this... Like, rather than having 4, you could have 3 collections, you know?
It's really a matter for councils to decide how best to collect. And I do take your point about purely meeting targets isn't the be-all and end-all. But I would imagine those councils that do collect garden waste in brown bins would say that they are probably encouraging people to recycle more than would be the case if it was just a composting bin.
I just love to know whether people say they have a composting bin and a collection. I wonder if the composting bin actually getting used, or is it just easier to throw it in the bin? I don't know. I'm just trying to tease out, because I also, this is all about the environment, and I worry about getting to a place where we have 4 or 5 different collections, and lorries going around every house in a council area, and what that does for the environment. And back to another hobby horse of mine about communal collections, I think that would be a way, somewhere we need to get to eventually, but we need to start getting down that road. I'm just not sure if it's contradictory to say that this is all about the environment, it's all about recycling, but yet we're going to drive around, stop a lorry outside every house in a council area 4 or 5 times a week. I think we need to be careful about where we're going with that, and all for the right reasons. But whether it's the right route, I'm just not so sure.
Actually talking now about collection once in a month.
Yeah, well, whatever. But I'm just saying, you know, maybe there's a better way of doing it. Maybe it is encouraging people to use compost bins. They might all have them, whether or not they use them. Maybe it's just easier to throw them in a big one. I don't know. So I think a bit of work will need to be done around what actually works rather than what ticks a box, because I think they're 2 different things sometimes.
Thank you very much. I would agree. I mean, it is primarily for the councils to design their collection systems, but I do think that these regulations in particular coming into being for councils in 2 years' time do give them an opportunity to revise and reconsider within the new council structures how their collection systems are currently working, because they're bound to have different collection systems in different parts of their council area. So really this is an opportunity to look at it afresh and put in place, as you say, a system which is the most efficient and effective for that locality.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Andrew?
Hey, thanks, Chair. I just really wanted to go back for a bit of clarification, because when you were talking to Pam about collecting the food waste separately, you said that, or at least I picked up that you said that if you'd seen it separate, it would have an impact on how much you're wasting. But then later on you said that there's a higher yield of food waste if it's collected separately. So that doesn't really tally, does it?
That's a good point. And I should clarify, when I say a higher yield, what I really mean is a higher capture rate. So that's a higher percentage capture rate from the black bin, which doesn't necessarily mean more kilograms. We would like to think that, or we expect that, as I say, there would be a waste prevention element to separate collections, and that should act as a downward pressure on the amount of kilograms within the bin. What we're really talking about in terms of yield is capture rate from the black bin. So it's a very good point.
Okay. So you think then that some people actually still put food in the black bin if they've got another bin? I didn't.
Well, at the moment,
really do that.
I don't.
Well, at the moment, 118,000 tonnes per year is put in black bins for landfill food waste, and at the moment.
But if they've got a food bin, they'll put it in the food bin.
I don't think that's the case, because you know there are a substantial number of schemes around Northern Ireland currently for collecting food waste, either separately or mixed. In fact, most people do have a food waste collection one way or the other at the moment, and yet we're getting this massive amount of food waste still placed in the residual.
From households?
From households, sorry, yeah. And 36,000 from commercial, as we said. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Thanks, that was really all.
Yeah, but that's really about educating people, or even sanctions. You know, if you open the black bin and see all those food waste,
Don't have to.
just tell the residents, and we're not clearing it. You're going to, you know, make us, you know, going to face fine. We could face fines if we don't reach a target for reducing our landfill, you know, volume. Yeah.
I mean, they do that when you see recycled stuff in the black bin. They say, no, I'm not taking that. It should be in the blue bin.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's right.
That's true. It's a matter for councils, but I think where there is gross evidence of a lack of compliance, gross lack of compliance, then I think councils are within their rights to take the appropriate action.
Have you, have you proposed to meet with Stephen Nolan? Because if you can get him converted, you would get a whole lot of people converted.
Don't be letting him think he's that much influence.
No, that's probably true. But it's bad to be hearing it on the radio that he doesn't want to wash out a yogurt pot.
Is that right? That's not good leadership. No.
I also add, Chair, that in fairness, you know, although we have 118,000 tonnes per year, you're never going to get, with the best will in the world and the best education in the world, you're not going to get that down to zero or anything like zero.
No.
But we want to get as much of it as possible.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier about really the intention to treat food waste and garden waste separately. Are you going to legislate at some stage on that, or?
No, the regulations are not prescriptive on councils as to how they treat the waste, but the legislations are drafted in such a way as to encourage councils in the direction of anaerobic digestion, which we believe adds value to the treatment process. Not just anaerobic digestion, and that's one of the reasons why we're not prescriptive, because 10 years ago anaerobic digestion wasn't a technology that people were aware of, and in 5 years' time there may be new technologies which are even better in terms of treating the food waste. So we want to facilitate those new technologies through the regulations without being prescriptive at this stage.
Okay. No more questions for you? Well, thank you very much. Sandy, I think, clarified the situation for us a bit more. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Members, we've got this briefing. I hope it kind of answers some of the questions that member had after the briefing from AC and North West. The thing is, the regulation had already been implemented. Nothing very much we can do. So, members, are you content just to note so the briefing and the explanation? Happy with that? Okay, thank you. Then we moved on to next item, a draft SR on page 91. Members, that's the planning amount of fixed penalty regulations. The purpose of the rule is to outline the level of fixed penalty for breaches of planning control. It proposes a penalty of £2,000 for failing to comply with an enforcement notice and £300 for failing to comply with the breach of condition notice. We looked at this, the SR1, on a meeting on the 19th of March 2015, and at that time we requested a briefing from departmental officials. Following the briefing on the 16th of April 2015, we were content for the department to proceed in making the rule. The statutory rule is subject to draft affirmative resolution procedure in the Assembly and will be made only if approved by a resolution of the Assembly. The examiner has not yet commented on the rule. So if members are content, I'll put the following question to you. The Committee for the Environment has considered the planning amount of fixed penalty regulations NI 2015 and subject to the report of the examiner of statutory rules recommends that it be affirmed by the Assembly. Members agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Next item, item 8, another SR. That's the hazardous waste on page 99. The purpose of the RU is to amend the Hazardous Waste Regulation NI 2005 to bring into effect changes introduced by the EU Commission. It will revoke the list of waste regulations and will replace all references to this with references to the EU decision. By doing so, the Department hopes to future-proof the hazardous waste regulations and avoid the need to amend the regulations every time the Commission updates the European list of waste. Certainly we've seen many of that in the past as well coming through us. So as this does not reflect any changes in policy but rather reflects technical elements, the Department was not required to consult on the proposed changes. The committee considered the SL1 for this RU at our meeting on the 30th of April, and at that time we were content for the Department to make the RU. The RU is subject to the negative resolution procedure and will come into operation on the 1st of June 2015. The examiner of statutory rules has not yet considered the RU. If members are content, I'll put the following question to you. The Committee for the Environment has considered the SR 2015/238, the Hazardous Waste Amendment Regulations NI 2015, and subject to the report of the examiner of statutory rules, has no objection to the RU. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Next, item 9, another SR, and that's on the motor vehicles driving licenses on page 109. Purpose of the RU is to transpose EU Directive 2006/126/EC on driving licenses. The directive sets out the requirements that member states must have in place for drivers to obtain driving licenses, including the security arrangement for production and issue of the driving license. The committee first considered the SL1 pertaining to the RU at our meeting on the 25th of September 2014 with regard to theory test fees and evocation of test passed certificates, and on the 16th of April 2015 with regard to the third driving licenses directive. At that time, the committee was content for the Department to proceed in making the RU. The RU is subject to the negative resolution procedure and will come into operation on the 29th of May 2015. The examiner of statutory rules has not yet considered the RU. If members are content, I put the following question. The Committee for the Environment has considered SR 2015/242, the Motor Vehicles Driving Licenses Amendment Number 2, Regulations NI 2015, and subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, has no objection to the RU. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. The next one is our final briefing today, and that's from the Woodland Trust on a register of trees of national special interest for Northern Ireland. That's the briefing paper on page 120. Members, if we would welcome Patrick Craig, Director of Woodland Trust, and Lorraine Mullally, Government Affairs Officer, Woodland Trust. And also Woodland Trust was in the Balmoral Environment Mackey too. Some of you may have talked to the staff there. And yourself were there too, Patrick?
I was, yes,
Yeah,
Chair.
that's right, that's right. So if you can proceed with your briefings and afterwards take questions from members. Please.
Thank you, Chairperson, and indeed my sincere thanks to your committee members for affording us this opportunity this morning. I will save you the pain of ad nauseum repeating what is in the paper. The paper has been circulated to members. Yeah. It would not be my intention to actually go through it line by line. So I think by way of background, if I could just say that the Woodland Trust was established here in Northern Ireland in 1996, and we now own and manage 50 woodlands right across the countryside, all of which afford free public access. So they come at no cost to the ratepayer or the taxpayer here in Northern Ireland. Some of the sites we own have got designations, such as areas of special scientific interest. Some in the northwest abound the Burntollet River, which has got an SAC accreditation. During the last 19 years, since 1996 when we formed here, the Trust, I was just checking the other day, the Trust has invested £14 million in trees and woodland in Northern Ireland. And to put it in context, of that 14 million, 2 million came from the Environment Agency. So essentially, for every pound invested by the Environment Agency, the Woodland Trust has invested a further £6. And I think in the context of the economy, it's important to say that a lot of that money is new money. So it's money that's coming from outside in to support our works. And a lot of it is down to some of the big corporates such as Sainsbury's and IKEA. But more importantly, as a membership organisation, our membership in the South East of England would subsidise what's happening here. So, and that's always welcome, that we are actually attracting additional money into the country. At the turn of the century, 15 years ago, we became aware that whilst we've got records for ancient buildings, ancient monuments, there has never been a comprehensive record carried out of our ancient trees and significant trees, and there are many of them. In fact, when we did mention it to the powers that be in government, there was a lot of scepticism as to whether we had any trees left. So we started an initiative at the turn of the century which we called the Ancient Tree Hunt, and it was a partnership between the Woodland Trust, the Tree Register of the British Isles and the Ancient Tree Forum. And we set about compiling a list of all of the trees that were of significance right across the countryside, using volunteers. So it came at very little cost. The only cost was the cost to the Trust of setting up a website where people could go out and record those trees. And despite the scepticism at the start of the project, I was checking the other day, we now have 3,000 trees listed that are either ancient or of significance dotted around the countryside. A lot of those trees will have political significance, some will have historical significance, and some will have cultural significance. Of the 3,000 trees, we reckon, and we don't know, there will be a number that are really special trees, and hence our visit to you today, because we are keen that the Minister, and the Minister has already expressed an interest in this, but with your support we're hoping that we can nudge the Minister towards creating a register of those very, very special trees, not just the 3,000 trees, but the very, very special trees. Who knows what that number might be? It might be 300, or it could be all 3,000. But we really do need, like our registers of ancient buildings and monuments, we do need a statutory register which would be held by the Department of the Environment, hopefully, so that people are aware of these trees. We have not gone so far as saying what the criteria might be, but we are looking at things like rarity and indeed significance in terms of historical significance. The interesting thing is that on the register that we've created so far, what amazed me was the number of trees that King William is purported to have slept under on his way to the Battle of the Boyne. Now, if you plot those on a map, King William obviously didn't have sat-nav, because he seemed to have crisscrossed the province on his way to the Boyne. But that's just one example of trees that we might want to record, having verified that William did in fact sleep underneath them. But there are other significant trees that we've come across. There's the beech trees at Ballyskay, in the grounds of the home of Dawson Stelfox, who the committee will be familiar with. The Ballyskay beeches were planted, 2 beech trees were planted by John Wesley on one of his tours to Ireland in the late 1700s, I think it was. And he planted 2 beech trees and he joined the two trees together, signifying his hope that there could be unity between the Anglican and the Methodist Church. Those trees are still there today. We've got the dark hedges at Strenocum, which are of absolute vital importance, not just because of the trees themselves, but because of the tourists that are attracted there. And I can guarantee members of the committee that if you go to Strenocum this morning, you will find nationalities from all around the world who will be parked and admiring the dark hedges, and they use it as a stopping off point going to or from the north coast. So trees like that are very, very important. Closer to home, we've got things like the mulberry tree in Bangor, which was planted by one of the Hamilton families, who was very keen to wove silk, and she thought by planting a mulberry tree she would have had silkworms and she would have been able to weave silk. So it's trees like that we think are important, and we think it's important that we draw together a comprehensive list detailing all of the significant trees. And you might ask why, but we're hoping that in drawing attention to the significance of the trees, that we will create an awareness. And by creating an awareness, we can actually safeguard the precious resource that are ancient and significant trees without having to come with a great big stick. We're not suggesting that every tree that we identify on the register should be subject to a tree preservation order. These trees have survived for centuries because they are either in the ownership of local authorities or indeed landowners and farmers who are scattered across the countryside, and they have protected them. But we think we need to actually build this awareness of their importance, and in doing so help to kind of guide decision making, so that if in fact planning service have got an application for a development, that they will be able to consult with the register and say, hold on a minute, yes, maybe we agree to the development, but you must take account and protect the actual significant trees. At this point, Chairperson, if I may, I'll hand over to my colleague Lorraine. Lorraine is our Local Government Affairs Officer. This is her first visit to Stormont today, and I hope that she is suitably impressed by the building. I'll hand over to Lorraine.
Yep. Just to stress that in order to maximise the reach and the status of the register, it's important that it's held by an executive department, and specifically the Department of the Environment, since that is in charge of our safeguarding our natural heritage. And as Patrick mentioned, in February, Leslie Cree, MLA, put down a written question asking if the Minister would support such a register, and he replied to say that he would be happy to receive a register. I think he'd slightly misunderstood there quite what we are asking, but he said he would give it further consideration, including, quotes, a consideration of how best to protect such trees. So there is a door slightly opened there, and this is just about pushing that further. In terms of whether or not the register should be statutory, we feel that in order to give it the appropriate weight to guide planners, as Patrick mentioned, the idea of it really is to give trees of national special interest recognition, status and value, on the one hand to help persuade owners of these trees to better protect them, but also to guide the planning service. So we do believe that the register needs to be statutory so that it can be used in planning decisions. I think they currently look at the ancient woodland inventory, which is online, but that doesn't include all of the trees of national special interest that we would hope to see on there. So that's why really we need this register, and it needs to be held by the Department of the Environment.
Okay, thank you. And Patrick, you said not all the trees in the register you proposed will not be under the TPO.
Yeah. Yes.
The tree preservation order.
Yeah.
So what's the point of registering it if you're not getting TPOs?
Yeah, I think Chairperson, is that in the first instance we need to actually identify what are the significant trees that we have right across the countryside, and identify why they are significant. Is it cultural? Is it historical? Is it purely because of their age? You know, if we take something like the oaks at Beaver, which are 800 years old, you know, and have seen quite a lot of history themselves over the centuries. We felt that if we can identify the trees, it would be only if there was a threat to those trees that we would actually look to put a preservation order on them. These trees have survived because of the good management over the centuries of private owners, farmers and local authorities, and in fact some on government land. So we felt that it would be inappropriate to actually start slapping tree preservation orders right across the countryside, and in fact I don't think the planning service could actually cope with it. You know, they've got enough on their plate at the moment. But I think the important thing is to actually establish the criteria. And we are not saying that we've come with the criteria. What we were proposing is that we would pull together a group that would engage with people like the Environment Agency, Forest Service, district councils, Woodland Trust, National Trust, and look at what criteria, what makes a tree significant, why is it important to us, and why should we preserve it. And in doing that, we then have the basis of a register which we would then hand to the Minister, and the Minister's department of his choosing would be the keepers of that. I am conscious that we are in times of there's not vast amounts of money. We're not coming here today asking for vast amounts of money. We're not asking for the Minister to invest fortunes in this. We as an organisation have committed to actually pulling together the basis for a register, and then it would be our wish that we would then hand it to the Minister and his officers would maintain the register. But it's not going to be a great burden in terms of the cost of maintaining it. It'll be a recognised register of the trees that are important. And I think we need to talk, when we look at examples like the dark hedges, we need to look beyond the conservation value of these trees. We need to look at the opportunities in terms of tourism for people who might be visiting and creating another opportunity for people to sell particular areas, whether it's the dark hedges in North Antrim or indeed the oaks in Derry.
In terms of maintaining it, then you said there would be no cost in registering it because you already have the database. So who's going to maintain it? Yourself, together with DOE, or?
I would hope, Chairperson, that we would support it, but I would hope that the DOE would maintain it. As you will appreciate, and this Chamber has heard of the financial situation that faces a lot of environmental charities, I would hope that the Department of the Environment or the Department or the agency chosen by the Minister would actually maintain it. But really, in reality, we're not going to be adding to it significantly. Hopefully, we're not going to be recording losses from it, except perhaps from storm damage. So it's important that we recognise this is not going to be a great financial burden on anybody, and it would be wrong of us to come to you today if this was going to be costing millions, because we would know what the answer would be from the Minister.
It would be nice to involve the public as well, not just your members, but the public to report on the trees and keep an eye on them.
Yes.
Would all this not be under the gambit of the Habitat Directive? Have you talked to the Minister on this?
No, we haven't as yet, but in fact, obviously it does contribute to the biodiversity strategy, because these ancient trees, by their very nature, support more wildlife in terms of the creepy crawlies that support the bird life. So, in fact, it is a very significant element of delivering on the biodiversity strategy. You mentioned about support.
And the Charter, the Ministers has signed the Charter today, is that right, Pam? Biodiversity Charter?
Yes.
Yeah.
You mentioned about supporters. To date, we have had 1,000 members of the public who have filled in cards and sent them to us or to the Minister, and that number is growing. And I think it bears out our belief that there is a greater appreciation in the current climate for the trees and for the landscape. And I would just suggest to members, if you would just close your eyes for a moment and imagine a landscape without trees. It would be a very, very dull and bare landscape.
It would be very bad for our health as well.
Certainly.
Yeah, and in terms of tourism, I went to Yosemite in California some years ago, and I remember those big red trees. I can't remember the proper name.
Giant redwoods.
Yes, but there's a special name for it, Latin name. The massive big red trees that you can drive a car through it.
We haven't got that on our list.
With the
They're not on our
branches,
list. Yes.
you know, coming down. Oh, just
America,
people just go in large numbers just to take photographs. Massive sizes. Red.
Madam Chair,
what
I
they
don't.
call red.
Yes, it's called the Sequoia Dendron giganticum.
That's what it is.
And it was introduced to Britain in I think in the mid 1700s. I can be corrected on that.
Yes.
And it was introduced, and when it came across this side of the Atlantic, we renamed it the Wellingtonia after the Duke of Wellington.
Okay.
And in those days, it was a guinea to buy a tree, so there was a snob value to owning a Sequoia dendron. When you consider that most of the people working in the gardens of the big estates probably earned a guinea a month, but it was a guinea for your Sequoia dendron.
Yes. Okay. Others. We have Carl. Yes.
Thanks, Chair.
Yeah.
You're going to slap a EPO on that big redwood you talked about there. No, thanks very much for your presentation. I mean, I'm actually a bit surprised, Patrick, that hasn't been done already, to be honest with you, in 2015, but I certainly don't have any problem supporting the case for a register. Just want to ask, obviously, you've outlined the tourism element, but there's also an educational element as well. But the thing, I think there's a wee bit of common sense there, because I know that in terms of planning, the actual TPOs can be a bit of a problem too. You know what I mean? And I think if you were to get the register and there's some statute there in some way, certainly there'd have to be a bit of work done there to ensure that you facilitate a bit of development, but you also protect what you want to protect as well. And I think you brought a fairly common sense argument or debate to us today, our presentation today. So I don't certainly have any issues in terms of supporting the actual gathering, you know, and bringing the database in relation to the trees. I think, as far as I know, Alban made a plan to say way back in '88 his needs to go down and on the back of it. Were you about that? You were about that time too, Alban, weren't you? I think there's 107, 108 trees planted around here somewhere. They might need to go down in the register as well.
Preservation order and all.
Preservation order. And the tree as well.
Okay. Planted by Alban
thank you very
McGuinness.
much for your
Through you, Chair, I think the member makes a good point in terms of the protection. I should add that by having them on an official register, a statutory register, there is an opportunity for us as an organisation to raise funding elsewhere that we can give as grant aid to owners of these trees if they need to do some remedial works or if they need to do some fencing. And it gives it the credibility if it's got a statutory register, but will help us to be in a position to give out grants to people who are the custodians of these trees.
But not many people like listed buildings, kind of because of the restrictions coming with the listed buildings. So there may be some resistance if a farmer's got 5 trees in his field or, you know, in the register. So.
Yeah, the idea really is to support the owners of the trees, and also just to point out that contrary to what it says on the paper, we do feel, actually, having reflected a bit further, that it would be useful for the owners to be notified that their tree is on the register, as long as it's made clear that that doesn't entail any statutory or kind of additional burden in terms of the protection. It's just about raising awareness first and foremost.
Sure. Okay, Colin?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I think it's a very good idea. I think we have to try and protect our heritage, whether natural or built, as much as we can. In terms of, it's been touched on the tree preservation order, just in terms of your experience, how much use have they been? Because I've seen cases where trees that have stood for 100 years have suddenly fallen down. Just before development was about to go up, accidentally fallen down, or somebody bumped into it or whatever, and the TPO hasn't been of much use after the fact, unfortunately, just the way things have unscrupulous people have gotten ways around it. What's your experience of it in terms of generally, or is there anything we can do to improve it, or do you think some of these might need a kind of a higher level of protection if they're found to be particularly significant?
Well, when I started with the Trust nearly 20 years ago, the fine for a violation of the TPO was £3,000. Over the years, that has now increased, and there is a possibility of £100,000, although that is down to the courts to decide as to the level of fine. In your own constituency, we had a situation at Prahen, where people came into Arwood, despite the fact that it had a TPO on it, and I won't mention anybody's names in this chamber.
I know the names, don't
you know, and cut down those trees. They were subsequently fined £2,000, which to me was the price of a round of drinks in the golf club that evening, which was disgraceful as far as I was concerned, but unfortunately is out of our hands. The other thing about a tree preservation order will stand, but the only thing that can trump a tree preservation order is the granting of development permission. So whilst the planners may consider it, it doesn't mean that they have to be guided by the tree preservation order. They might say it is better to let the development go ahead. So we've had, in 2011, we had the new planning legislation. In the past, a tree could have been removed despite the preservation order if it was deemed to be dead, diseased or dangerous. We got the clause of diseased, which was the loophole that was used, removed at the last legislation, 2011, and that seems to have worked, because in fact we had experts jumping from everywhere saying this tree is diseased, it needs to be cut down, and then suddenly there was a planning application, and the argument was that, like it or not, we are all diseased from the day we are born.
And it can last for a long time.
In the words of Willie Clark.
Yes. Diseased trees, it can last for a long time.
Very much so.
So some of these are going. I know the Prahen case very, very well. You know, that's an ancient wood of great significance, and there will be some trees or woods that are more significant than others, and that maybe some of them a £2,000 fine might be enough, but for others it just wouldn't be. Can you see a situation where you would almost have a sliding scale of importance, where there's some that, you know, that need to be protected at all costs, almost, and others that need to be protected, but you know?
Yeah, I think it's important to say that we are looking at individual trees here. When we did the inventory of ancient woodland, and we discovered between ancient woodland and long-established woodland, there's 10,000 hectares of woodland that is ancient or long-established. And that is woodland that can be traced back to pre-1800. So the first edition ordnance survey maps, going back to the 1600s, some of the old maps that were created around the plantation of Ulster. And we found there's 10,000 hectares of that, 25,000 acres in old money, as I call it. And those now, within the planning policy statements, those are recognised for their importance. And there is a presumption within PPS2 against granting permission that is going to actually impact on ancient and long-established woodland. Through the forestry legislation of 2010, we got a reintroduction of a requirement for a felling licence. Up until 2010, Northern Ireland was the only country in Western Europe where you didn't need permission to fell woodland. So we've actually come a long way, and I say this and I mean it, we've come a long way because of the devolved administration we have. It had been 53 years since the last piece of forestry legislation, and it was really when Stormont came back and Stormont took on board the need for new legislation to protect woodlands and forestry that we actually got it. So, you know, when people talk about the importance of this building in these chambers, they should recognise, and I think members should be actually pointing out what has been achieved. You know, So we're happy that we've got protection for trees and woodland. Okay, we'll always get the rogue developer or rogue individual who might cut down trees. But what we want to focus now on are those individual trees. So it may be the mulberry tree in Bangor, or it may be King William's tree on the Malone Road that he slept on. Well, I suspect he slept in the big house and his men slept under the tree on his way to the Battle of Boyne. So we're looking for recognition for those, and we are stressing that nobody wants a big stick. You know, nobody wants to be imposing more and more requirements on landowners and owners of those trees. But we feel that by actually having a recognised register, which will have a statutory basis, that we then can actually look at how we actually reward people who have those trees. And we as an organisation will seek out the money from some of our sponsors to look at how we can actually do that.
And in the worst case scenario, inclusion on the register should hopefully help a court to decide on the value of the tree.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Is there in any other jurisdictions in the UK that might have that statutory register?
As
it stands, we have a campaign going across all of the countries, the UK, okay. And they're all at a fairly similar stage. I know in Scotland, it only took 48 emails, I think it was, to the minister there for him to say this is a good idea and passed it on to the Forestry Commission. They convened a first group for people to come together, as Patrick said, to discuss the criteria and so on. In England, they met with the Forestry Minister just before the election, but he's since he's lost his seat, so there's a bit of work to do there again, but there was a very positive reaction, and in Wales also there's a campaign going forward, so hopefully it won't be long before we do see these registers across the whole country.
Yes, it would be good to see not just one region.
Yes.
All the regions
Absolutely.
in the UK have that, yeah. Okay, well, as a very keen walker, I certainly would very much support you in preservation of trees in the countryside. Well, no more questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Patrick and Lorraine. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy your trip here.
Thank you, Chair.
We will certainly we will forward members, if members agree, we'll forward the briefing to the department. If they're doing this, they may need a public consultation. You know, here we have to consult on many different issues of public interest, obviously. So, but we certainly would encourage the Minister to consider it.
Thank you, Chairperson. And
thank you.
Indeed, thanks to your colleagues on the committee, but more importantly, your Secretariat, who have been absolutely excellent in helping us to bring this forward very, very quickly, and we are indebted to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And by the way, in terms of funding, are you okay with funding from DOE?
Yes, that at the end.
You don't really have to answer that. I mean, but
of course, the one.
Chairperson, as I say, the 2 million that we've received over the last 19 years has been pivotal to us attracting in another 12 million of, and I stress it, new money. We've just spent the weekend filling in our application, and I should thank the committee at this stage, because the visit by the Minister was excellent to this committee, and really, in fairness to the Minister, I should thank the Minister, because the Minister did actually pick up the baton and ran with it when the issue was raised with him, and we are deeply appreciative of his efforts.
So you're in the process for applying for the new Environment Fund?
Yeah.
Okay,
we'll go down to 2 meals a day rather than 4.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Okay, members, are you content with my suggestion to send this to the Minister and encourage him to consider? Okay, next one's correspondence. Members, page 123. So let me see, if I refer you to the cover memo from the clerk at page 124. Okay, so following the committee's informal meeting last week with representatives from the NIE sector and the Centre of Archaeological Fieldwork at Queen's, page 128 to 146, where you have the papers. You will find correspondence also from Queen's University regarding the non-renewal of the NIE's contract with Quercus for the Natural Heritage Research Partnership at page 148, and an additional 2 emails from Queen's also in the table pack at pages 11 and 12, again on the, is it Quercus? Is that how you say it? Quercus, yep. And that's in your table pack. Obviously, the Minister is still going through the process of funding for the environment sector, but the 2 Queen's partnership are outside of this new funding. They have not been invited as the 23 organisations to apply for this fund. So, members, would you agree that we write to the Minister regarding the issues raised in the correspondence from correspondent in relation to the Queen's contracts, and just to ask him really what he intends to do? I think Queen's also expressed concerns about it being a legal contract. So whether the department may face some legal challenge on that effect, and also in relation to fines from directives, infraction cases, that is a worrying fact. So, members, and also yeah. Okay, so also there is your cover memo at page 127, that if members want to note.
There's some suggestions in terms of things that we might want to write to the Minister about on page 127.
Okay. Yes, if you can.
This is just off the back of the informal briefings that we had last week, and also obviously the additional correspondence that we received in relation to the Natural Heritage Partnership Research Programme. So, suggesting that we send the relevant items of correspondence to the Minister and ask him what measures that he's taken to avoid increasing the risk of infraction fines as a result of a diminished sector and a diminished research base. What's he doing to protect in the longer term the environment sector through his discussions with the Executive and the Agriculture Minister? That was something that was raised at the informal meeting last week, just in terms of what happens after 2016. What measures he's doing to provide assistance to the partnership that NIEA has with Queen's in respect of research into conservation and biodiversity, and also the work to protect the historic and built environment. So there are issues that the Centre of Archaeological Fieldwork raised, but also in relation to the Natural Heritage Programme as well, and to ensure that DOE is able contractually to end the contract with Quercus. Quercus have advised that, in their view, he can't, but it's just to seek the view of the Minister on that.
That's fine, I can support that.
Okay, support that. Okay, members, then we moved on then. Correspondence then, list of correspondence on page 164. Members, items 12.2 on page 171 is correspondence from the ad hoc committee set up to undertake the committee stage of the NIPSO, a committee set up to look at the bill. A covering memo from the committee office is also attached. The ad hoc committee is seeking views on the bill by the 26th of May. The purpose of the bill is to combine the offices of the Assembly Ombudsman and Commissioner of Complaints into a single new office. Local government will now fall under the new proposed office of the Ombudsman. It previously fell under the Commissioner for Complaints. So are members content to note? Okay. The ad hoc committee has already written to Nelger.
Better declare we're on the. I'm on the committee and
Yeah.
Tom's on the so better. Yeah.
So's Alban.
So better
Okay.
just declare that.
Okay.
And so Gary. Yeah, Gary's on as well.
Goodness me. All right, lots of involvement in this anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you can update us then on the progress.
I know.
Okay.
Busting down the door to get
Yeah.
in.
Next item is 12.4 on page 178, and that's correspondence from the department providing an update on the George Best Belfast City Airport planning agreement. Members, are you content to note?
Great.
Okay. Item 12.5 on page 187 is correspondence from the Enterprise, Trade and Investment Committee to the department seeking a response to its inquiry into growing the economy and creating jobs in a reduced tax environment. I don't know whether we agree with reduced tax, but anyway, that's the environment we're probably going to be facing. So, members, are you content to note?
Great.
Okay. Next item then. Item 12.6 on page 189 is correspondence from the Finance and Personnel Committee regarding the monitoring of savings delivery plans for 2014-15. And the department says it expects to deliver its its planned savings in 2014 and 15, and that an additional £562,000 above the target is anticipated from driver licensing fees and the carrier bag levy. So that's to be welcomed, and we're certainly very pleased to see that. Members, are you content then to forward the department for comment? So, yeah. Okay. Yes. Content with that. Next item, 12.7 on page 198. That's correspondence from Angler Classics regarding development on the banks of the 6 Mile Water River. If members are content to forward this correspondence to the CEO of Antrim and Newton Abbey, Newton Abbey Borough Council, which has responsibility for planning in this area. Members content with that? Yep. Also, just to mention too, in your table pack, we have correspondence from department regarding consultation on draft local government pension scheme amendment 3 regulations, just ready to note, and it's out for consultation on the 25th of May. And also then on page 19 of your table pack is the email from the No Grievy Quarry campaign group. They wish to brief the committee on mineral policies. Members, you may remember that they had set up a seminar here and inviting members to go and to get a briefing from them after our committee sometime last year. And I know a number of members went for the presentation. I met with the group individually in one of the members, their members' home, to look at the presentation, so I wasn't at that meeting. Members, I just think maybe there's no point to have them to come and give another presentation. Perhaps if we could write back to them and ask them to send us a written submission, in particular about the mineral policy. We cannot intervene with any individual planning applications. They are against the planning application of a quarry in their area. It is a beautiful countryside, I have to say. But you know, as a rule, as a policy, the committee, we don't interfere with the planning decisions in local government, particularly in local government now. So, members, would you agree if we asked them to send us a written paper on what their views are on reviewing or changing on changes for the policy? for the mineral policy, and then
Yeah.
we can take it from there.
If it has an impact on policy generally, I think we're entitled to.
That we'll look at, that's right, yeah. Okay, members, yep.
Yeah.
So just want to ask you, are you content then with the suggested actions on the cover note?
Great.
Okay, then work forward programme, members, on page 203, or forward work programme more. Any comments on the programme? Okay, and to ask member if you're content to hold an additional meeting on Tuesday the 2nd of June to receive an oral briefing on the June monitoring round. Because next week we're going to be out on a visit. They wanted to come next week, but unfortunately we can't do that. So we'll do it on an additional meeting next Tuesday, and
Tuesday the 2nd.
Tuesday the 2nd, not next, but the following Tuesday. I mean, yeah.
Have you time?
Oh, yeah. We're still here, Chair.
1:45 maybe. 1:45, just
Point
because.
raised by the member there, Chair.
Yeah, okay, and there's just one item, really, just to look at the monitoring round. Then just to remind members, then next week we are going to Groomsport, and you can see on your tabled papers, page 21, where we'll be having an opportunity to see a marine conservation zone, a special protected area, and an area of special scientific interest. There will be details sent to you early next week. So we're going to Groomsport, and we'll be there for 10. Okay, and members can all make your own way. There will be a map provided for members to find it. So AOB, any items for AOB? No. Okay, next meeting will be Tuesday, the 2nd of June, 12:30 in the Senate chamber, and that is to look at the June monitoring round. Okay, members, thank you very much.
Right.
We'll see you next week. And remember, it's quite cold, quite open. Bring proper outdoor gear.